Or sellers at the deadline. Who is most likely to be heading off the island? We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, we'll have a full preview of tonight's game in Seattle and the latest injury updates on Semyon Varlamov and Oliver Wahlstrom. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. So glad you could join us today, and thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Lots to talk about on today's show. The Islanders not eliminated from the playoffs yet, but doesn't look like they're going to make it. So if the Islanders get close to the trade deadline and they are in selling mode, who's most likely to be traded off the island? We'll take a quick look at that. We have the latest injury updates on Simeon Varlamov and Oliver Wahlstrom, and we have a full preview of tonight's game against the Seattle Kraken as the Islanders make their first trip to Seattle. And we've got our Islanders birthday of the day, a big defenseman. Let's see if you can figure out who that is as we go back to the either late 80s or early 90s. We have got, if you've got something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like us to talk about, feel free to send us an email. The email address, as always, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we are happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest Islanders news, notes, and I am live tweeting during every home and road game, well, nearly every. And yes, I will be live tweeting tonight, even though it's a late start. So night owls, if you're up, please feel free. I'll give you some instant insight and analysis, and always happy to interact with fans during the game and really any time. All right, Islanders losing at home Sunday to the Montreal Canadiens, and it's just looking less and less likely that this team has a playoff run in them. But look, the season isn't over, but you know, mathematically, the Islanders have about an 8.5% chance, I think, of making the playoffs right now. And they just haven't shown the consistency necessary to go on what they need to do, which is like a 7-1-1 kind of a streak. We just haven't seen that up and down the lineup. There are too many players who are just not playing up to their usual level of quality hockey. So the trade deadline is now about a month away, a little less than a month away. If the Islanders go into selling mode, who is most likely to be headed off Long Island and elsewhere at the trade deadline? And I think there are 5 players who would be at the top of the list. That doesn't mean that these players are definitely gone, and it doesn't mean that other players couldn't be included in a trade. But let's start with the obvious. There are 4 players who will be unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. They are Andy Greene and Zdeno Chara on the blue line, Cal Clutterbuck and Zach Parise among the forwards. And I think each of these 4 players do have some value in a trade deadline situation. None of them, quite honestly, are going to get you a huge haul. None of these are, you're not giving up a 30-goal scorer or sniper, an elite goalie. You'll get something for these guys, but it's not going to be a first-round pick or a top prospect, you'll get something back. But out of these four, look, let's start with Andy Greene. What are the advantages of someone acquiring him? Depth defenseman, reliable in his own zone, experienced, leadership, been there, done that as far as playoff hockey. And if you've got some young defensemen, he could almost be like a player coach. I think the same goes for Zdeno Chara, who's also on this list, although Z obviously adds elite size and maybe even more leadership in that he's a former captain. He's won Stanley Cups. He's a future Hall of Famer. And again, his reach and his size allow him to be more reliable defensively, perhaps, than Greene. And certainly he brings more of a physical element right now than Andy Greene does. Among the forwards, Zach Parise, what you get with him, he's a former captain. He clearly gives all-out effort throughout every shift he's on the ice. You never have to question that. He's a good role model. He'll kill penalties. He could be on a team's second power play unit, although, how successful has he been in that role? Not very this year, quite honestly. He is no longer an elite goal scorer. He is now a 10 to 15 goal a year guy. And he's not a top six forward. Maybe for a game or two, if you need him to step into that role in a pinch, you can move him up to that role. But he is really a third or fourth line forward at this stage in his career. He adds the leadership aspect, as we said, and he, is experienced, and he's the kind of guy, he's not quite Ray Bourque, but he's the kind of guy that, a long veteran who you would love to see get a Stanley Cup before he retires, could be in the right spot at the right time, a benefit to another team. And then you have Cal Clutterbuck, who may have more value than any of the other three players we've mentioned. Clutter is physical. He is certainly a third or fourth line, bottom six forward. Adds leadership, good in the locker room, tough guy, but doesn't take foolish penalties. Clutterbuck has that reputation. Oh, yeah, he's physical, he's tough. But he never has had over 100 penalty minutes in a season during his NHL career. He rarely takes dumb penalties. He can score the odd goal. And I think, you lose when you separate him from Cizikas and Martin, but I think Clutterbuck is one of those guys who, I could totally see him being someone valuable to the right team in the right situation as far as the playoffs are concerned. The other player who is not yet an unrestricted free agent, who has 1 year left on his contract, but who may bring in more in a trade than any of the other guys we've mentioned, remains Semyon Varlamov. Varley has, that $5 million contract. And his goals against average this year, the 2.57, the save percentage, 918. Those are solid numbers. Yeah, he's only 3-9-1 on the year, but the Islanders aren't even scoring 2 goals a game when he is their goalie. 1.69 goals again scored by the Islanders when Varley is in the line. That is near the bottom of the league in that category. There are teams right now, whether it's Colorado, Vegas, a couple of other teams that may be looking for either a backup or a 1A. Varley may make sense. He'd free up some cap space. We've talked about it on this show before. He's still, got some quality years left. He's not so old that, he's past his prime. And the Islanders, I think, would be comfortable overall with Ilya Sorokin being the number 1 guy, although it would leave them without a bona fide number 2 right now. So again, you'd have some cap space and some time to get that number 2 guy next year. Maybe Jakub Skaraj then grows into that role. We have to see. But overall, those are the 5 players that I think most likely to buy the Islanders this season. At the trade deadline, if indeed they are clearly out of the playoff race when we get to that point. All right, we've got a lot more to talk about on this episode. We have the latest injury updates on Semyon Varlamov and Oliver Wahlstrom, plus a full preview of tonight's game in Seattle. All that and more still to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at BetOnline. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, and player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So the Islanders make their first ever updates. Simeon Varlamov and Oliver Wahlstrom at practice on Monday. So Varley no longer on the COVID protocol. He was out of it, having been in there for the last 9-day practice with the team, but they're not sure yet when he'll be ready to start. Barry Trotz telling reporters after Monday's practice, the first thing is that we need to see where he's at. With the COVID, everybody's been hit a little differently. It affects everybody a little differently. When he's ready, then we'll put him in the mix. He will back up tomorrow for sure, but he will not start. So that's where Varley is at. Meanwhile, Wahlstrom, who missed the Sunday game with an upper body injury, did practice with the team on Monday as well. Now, no guarantees that he's back in the lineup tonight, but it is looking like it is a real possibility that he will be available. So that is the Seattle Kraken, the newest franchise in the National Hockey League. And the Kraken, most expansion teams, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who has been, sort of following the Kraken throughout the season. They are, having their share of struggles, and it just becomes a question of getting, the right players in the right place. And that time. Now, yes, there's no question that the Vegas Golden Knights did a great job of contending immediately, but that really is the exception to the rule. And what we see in of 31-4. That's will back for Vancouver Monday night, although the game doesn't start until 10 o'clock Eastern time, a little bit after the time I'm recording this. They do struggle to score goals. They're 24th in the league. Special teams have been a problem. 29th, the penalty kill, 26th. And I guess one of the bigger prizes for the Kraken is Philip Grubauer has been a disappointment, a 3.15 goals against average and an 8.87 save percentage. Jared McCann, their first ever 20 goal scorer. He leads the team in that category with 20 and has 32 points. Former Islander Jordan Eberle, 14 goals, 29 points. And statistically, at least, far outplaying the man who they brought in to replace him, which is Kyle Palmieri. Coming into last night's game against Vancouver, 3 straight losses for Seattle. They lost at home to Toronto, and they lost at Winnipeg and at Calgary. Let's take a look at the line combinations for the Kraken. Top line, Alexander Wenberg, Martin Johansson, and Jordan Eberle. The ex-Tampa Bay Lightning. He's the second. With Callie Yark and Mason Appleton. Third line, fourth line is Adam Larson, and then the third pair of the action lately. J.D. Schwartz and Brandon Tanev both injured and on lost Montreal. You've already lost Seattle. Islanders got to win this game, get the road trip off to a good start. And again, teams, I think, is an area where the Islanders should be something going. The Kraken 29th on the power play, only a 16.1% success rate, and 26th on the PK, a 75.4% success rate at kill-off penalties. The Islanders can get a power play goal in this game. That would definitely give them a boost, and they need to get that power play going and off the schneid. It's, again, very inconsistent. They go a few games where they look good, and then they struggle. Getting Oliver Wahlstrom back in the lineup, and we hope he will be back in the lineup, would be a boon to the Islanders' power play. We talked about the two ex-Islanders, Eberle, certainly fit in well team. And then, you didn't have Austin Czarnik, and Czarnik has 1 assist in his first 3 games with the Kraken. The Islanders need this a 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern time start for Islanders in Seattle. And again, I'll be live tweeting during the game. Keep in mind my usually these podcasts go live around 12:25 a.m., a little after midnight. It'll be probably about 45 minutes to an hour after the conclusion of the game that we post the Wednesday edition of the podcast. We've got more to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. When we come back, time for our Islanders birthday of the day, a physical defenseman who spent some time with the Islanders in the 1990s. So let's see if you can figure that out. All that and more to come on the Locked On Islanders podcast. Time now, birthday of the day, and a Monday. Yesterday was the 53rd birthday for former Islanders defenseman Wayne McBean, the Calgary native drafted in the first round, 4th overall by the LA Kings for the Kings in 1988. 27 games, had an assist, was traded to the Islanders during the 88-89 season, played 19 games for the Isles, and picked up his first assist there. Stayed in the Islanders organization through the 92-93 season, then finished his career in Winnipeg was traded by the Islanders to Winnipeg midway through 394. For career 211 games in the NHL, 10 goals, 49 points, and 160 penalty minutes. McBean played in 2 playoff games for the Islanders in 1990 in the opening round series against the Rangers, had a goal, an assist, and 2 points. We're going to go back and look at one of McBean's better games with the Islanders. 1991 at the Metropolitan Islanders facing the Minnesota North Stars in this one. And in goal for the Islanders, Steve Weeks. For the Minnesota Islanders, getting on the board first, Derek King is 13th. Steve Thomas and Pierre Turgeon with the assist. That took exactly 11 seconds after the game got underway. Then Ray Ferraro, his 6th, unassisted at 15:01, 2-0 Islanders after 1 period. Basil McRae and Ken Baumgartner dropping the gloves late in that period. Those two heavyweights going at it, and McRae got the extra 2 for instigating. In the second period, the Islanders get a shorthanded goal with Derek King in the box for slashing. Pat Flatley, his 5th from Hogue. Islanders 3-0. But on that very same power play, Ulf Dahlen, his 9th from Mike Craig and Neil Broughton at 7:31 gets Minnesota on the board. Islanders up 3-1 after 40 minutes, but that lead vanished in the third period. Mike Modano, his 5th from Brian Bellows at 3:25. Yes, that's Kiefer Bellows' dad. That made it a 3-2 game. Then Modano again, his 6th from Todd Ellick and Brian Propp at 6:19, ties the game at 3. And then in the third period with Uwe Krupp in the box for cross-checking, Todd Ellick, a power play goal, his 2nd from Ulf Dahlin and Mike Craig at 8:40. And suddenly the Islanders are trailing 4-3. But the Islanders get a power play chance. Mark Burrow off for cross-checking for Minnesota, and Ben Hogue, his 8th of the year on the power play. Flatley and Tom Curvers with the assist at 10:55, and the game is even. Then our Islanders' birthday of the day, Wayne McBean gets a shorthanded goal. Adam Creighton of the Islanders off for interference. McBean, his 2nd from Hogue and Dave McElwain at 13:46. That gives the Islanders the lead. Pierre Turgeon, his 6th from Derek King at 15:09, increases the lead to 6-4. And then Ferraro, his 7th from Hogue and Jeff Norton at 18:50, closes out the scoring. Islanders won by a score of 7-4. For our Islanders' birthday of the day, Wayne McBean, he has 1 goal. It is the game winner. It is shorthanded. He had 2 shots on goal and was a +1 in this game. In goal, Steve Weeks, 39 saves as the Islanders were outshot 43-25. But Weeks' strong goaltending and a couple of shorthanded goals able to help the Islanders win this hockey game. And the game-winning goal for the big defenseman, Wayne McBean, is our Islanders' day of the day. Islanders got to come up with something tonight. Got to win this game. Like I said, ready to fully give up on this season, but you lose tonight. Maybe we're getting close to that point. So got to hope for at least a steady performance tonight. And again, we'll keep you up to date on Twitter as to the potential return of Oliver Wahlstrom to the lineup, and Varlamov scheduled to be the backup. Thanks for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy the game tonight. And of course, let's go Islanders.